Hi, Meredith.
Hi,
How are you today?
I'm great. Excited to be here with
Awesome.
you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining the show today. So,
Thanks for
first thing,
having me.
Meredith. Yeah. I know the audience. I know you, and I know the audience is going to have a great time listening to our conversation today. A lot of fascinating things to share. So, as we always do, I'd like to start with a brief introduction. So, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay. My name is Meredith Ian. I am the global head of sales training at Spotify right now. I have 22 years of experience in the media industry, so in the within the advertising industry, and 15 years in digital advertising sales management. But my work actually is focused around all things talent development. So my expertise is around the full life cycle of the employee. So that includes everything from hiring, onboarding, training, career pathing, and employee relations. And truly, my work passion is helping leaders be better managers and better coaches, therefore amplifying training's impact across the organization. And so, outside of all of that, my life passion is really around wellness and just being in the great outdoors.
Awesome. Thank you, Meredith.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get a lot more into everything you just shared here. One of the traditions on the show is that we like to talk about how we met each other. So I'll share with the audience how you and I had met. We were
Okay.
part of a leadership training program at a really amazing company called Own the Room. So we met, I believe it was October of 2018. And I'll ask you the question I ask everybody: what was your first impression of me when we first met, or when we were in that 3 day training together? What was your impression of me?
My initial impression, honestly, was it's another sales guy. I think I just, I heard you said your name and what you did. And I've worked with so many salespeople throughout my career. And, salespeople just, they have a gift. They're all very likable. So I think, it was really my own bias that made me think, oh, it's another sales guy. And but I think over the course of the class that we were in together, over I think it was like 2 or 3 days together, I realized pretty quickly that we were kindred spirits, and I learned a really valuable lesson that day, not to just prejudge everyone with sales in their title.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I was thinking about that. You're like, I'm going to a training to get away from salespeople for a few days, and I think there actually was a Spotify salesperson in there with us, or a couple
Yeah,
of them actually. So
yeah.
yeah, you love us and you love us and you hate us. You can admit it.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fine.
definitely you know what it is? I love salespeople. I am not a salesperson, I'm a sales trainer, but
Uh huh.
I have such a profound respect for the work,
Hmm.
and I just really am in awe at salespeople who are really, really great, and it really is a privilege to get to work with such amazing and smart people.
Yeah, I do want to correct something. I'm a former salesperson, so I
Yes.
am. Yeah, but I'm still always be a salesperson at heart. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's funny. So now I'm going to share with you what I thought of you, which is new information because we haven't talked about this.
Yeah.
I remember meeting you. I thought you were very serious at first, and now that once I understood what you did, that would make sense. But I also realized, I think we maybe got partnered up on an exercise pretty quickly. That yeah, we are very similar. And that you were somebody that I wanted to get to know and spend more time with, which we've actually been fortunate that we've actually got to do.
Mhm.
We've got to do outside of that training over the past year or so, and that now we are almost neighbors
Mhm.
in an area of the United States, Catskills and the Poconos, which is really
Yeah.
exciting. So I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other, which
I
is
hope
really
so.
exciting. Yeah. So
Oh, that's
congratulations.
so funny that you thought I was
Yes.
serious. I don't think of myself as an extremely serious person, so it's interesting to hear that as the first impression.
Yeah, I was told by another guest that he thought I was very intense, which I consider myself also not serious and not intense, but
Uh-huh.
maybe the energy we put out to others is more
Yeah,
real than the energy that we find in ourselves. But
yeah.
it's all good. It's all good. So here
Cool.
we are today. So
Yeah.
let's get into it because I know the audience is going to love to hear all about you. So let's start with something that you nerd out about. What geeks you up? What do you nerd out about?
So I'll give you two answers. The first will be around more, I'll give you like a personal perspective and then a work perspective because there's
Hmm.
a lot of things I could nerd out about. But I think for my personal life, Anything around just general wellness. So cooking, I love to cook. I'm not a vegetarian, but I do cook mostly vegetarian or a lot of vegetables. I'm a big proponent of having lots of vegetables and greens and things like that. Fitness, and not just like, working out, working hard, and but more about like making fitness work for you and your lifestyle. So I love talking to friends who are trying to figure out, how do I get more active, and rather than just kind of feeling like I always have to go to the gym. I
Hmm.
love hiking in nature. I could sit around and look at and talk about birds and trees and flowers and stuff all day. um, and then also mental health. I've read a lot of books about just mental well-being, and I think it's an endlessly fascinating topic. I think if I had realized that passion at a younger age, I probably would have studied it and maybe even gone into that field. But all of this kind of comes together. I like to describe myself as a tree hugger in business casual clothing.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
And then,
question. Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say from work life, um, the thing that I probably geek out the most about is what I describe as the teaching hospital approach. So this is about my philosophy, my core philosophy of all things training is that training doesn't really happen in the classroom, which is kind of humbling to say as a trainer. That it doesn't happen in the classroom. That it truly lives or dies with managers, and so to truly have an ongoing learning environment, you need to enable managers to be great coaches.
Hmm. No, that's awesome. And me spending 20 years in corporate as well, I am one of those people who actually liked going to trainings,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Good.
probably why yeah,
We
which is
love
probably why we met at training. Yeah, exactly,
So, like
exactly.
anyone listening to this podcast, if you love going to training, just know that your trainers love you.
Yes, exactly. Because there's so many of those, especially salespeople, are like, I don't have time for this. I got to hit my quota, and they sit there with a scowl on their face. I was always the one who uh, enjoyed the trainings, which is probably why we met at a training.
Yeah,
Uh, I,
that makes
I had
sense.
a, I had a question about something you mentioned earlier. So
Please.
cooking.
Hmm.
So let's say that you were hosting a VIP. That VIP can be whoever would be a VIP for you.
Mm-hmm.
What would you make them for a meal? Like, what's your go-to?
Oh, that is a tough one. I would probably do some sort of a pasta dish, depending on what they eat. If they're a vegetarian, I have some really awesome go-to vegetarian dishes. But if I was really trying to wow someone and maybe not be the healthiest meal in the world, it would probably be some sort of pasta dish with like Italian sausage and broccoli rabe and some Parmesan cheese mixed in. Going to make me hungry talking
Mm,
about it. That's one of my favorite
hmm.
dishes.
Yeah.
And if there were a vegetarian, I would do my vegan Tuscan stew, which is it's like a tomato broth with white beans and vegetables and a little bit of spice in it. Really, really good.
Wow. That sounds amazing. I was thinking I am not a chef by any stretch of the imagination, and if I had a VIP coming to cook, I would probably not go with a healthy option. I'd go with a tasty option, unless they were a health nut. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that. Thanks for sharing both of those. Super interesting. So, next question I have for you
Hmm.
is, what's something that is inside of your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's comfort zone?
Ah, inside my comfort zone. I would probably say the thing that's become more inside my comfort zone, weirdly, is pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, and that's probably not the true with the case with most people.
Mm-hmm.
um, I used to care so much what other people thought of me, and I was so terrified to take any sort of risk, or it was just always in my head. And I luckily had a few different mentors at really crucial stages in my life. And I learned, many years ago that I really did need to be pushed. And I still do to some extent, but I've learned how to push myself. But at the time, I sought people who would push me outside of my comfort zone and give me that assurance that I needed, that it's like, just give it a try. You have nothing to lose. Just do it. And since then, I've taken a lot of risks, big and small. And I would say because of that shift in mindset and the willingness to put myself out there, I've flexed that muscle to the point that now I've got all sorts of great stuff happening in my life that I'm excited about, that I'm proud of, and I wouldn't have any of these things if I wasn't willing to take some risks.
Yeah. Is there any particular moment that comes to mind of when you expand, and that's something we talk about in coaching a lot, and you're a
Mhm.
fellow coach as well, where you talk about expanding your comfort zone. Is there anything that comes to mind that was a specific example of that, or a moment in time for you in your life that you can reflect back on?
Yeah, I can give you a number of examples in my personal and professional life. I would say just moving into my first training role. So, I had an HR background that evolved into a training role, and I had done some training, but, with sort of oversight from other people, but then eventually had an opportunity to be in charge of it, and I went for it. And I really needed to be pushed into that. And I'm so, so grateful that I went for it because
Hmm.
I just absolutely love it. So what a thing to miss out on, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I used to study martial arts. I've been in hiatus for a couple of years, and I performed a three-man weapon form. So I was holding a saber. My partners were both with spears, and we performed this form at a kung fu school banquet in front of over 200 people. And it was probably one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done. And we pulled it off to a standing ovation, if you can believe it.
That's amazing. Yeah.
um, a few other risks. I mean, I left a company that I was comfortable at, had been there for 8 years to go to a company where I was the only person doing this new job and building something completely from scratch. That terrified me, but I did it, and it was a stepping stone to where I am today.
Hmm.
And, on a probably a the most personal level, just pushing against social norms. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I had to learn as I built the life I wanted to live. And my husband, Joe, who you know, and I
Hmm.
had been together for 10 years before we got married. And we never knew if we were going to get married. So it was just kind of being together, knowing that we're in it together, but it may or may not turn into marriage. And in addition
Hmm.
to that, we chose not to have children pretty early on in our relationship. So those are two
Hmm.
things that, pretty much go against social norms that I had to be like, this is my life and I'm not going to apologize or make excuses for it.
Yeah. That's super cool. I want to let the audience know that I have not seen any spear wounds that you have, and I don't, and then you have all your limbs as well. So it sounds like the martial arts performance
Yeah.
went extremely well, and there was no injuries either, which is
No,
great.
no, I was not harmed in the performance.
That's
I
that's
made it
that's
through
awesome.
okay. Yeah.
So
Now the others though, I can't speak for them, but
yes, well, everybody likes a little accident every now and again. So let's take a look now, or let's look at the reverse. So what would be something that is still outside your comfort zone? And as you just covered for us, like your comfort zone is pretty large, but what's something that's still outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's comfort zone?
Outside of my comfort zone, I would probably, I mean, the things that scare me the most, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but I'm terrified of spiders and bugs of any kind. Like I lose it. Like I'm not saying like, oh, it's so creepy. Like I spaz out and like physically flail. So that's that's something I would really like to overcome
Hmm.
for sure. What else is outside of my comfort zone? Does that give you a little insight?
No, that's great, and I'm thinking about. It's funny because you live in New Jersey where there's lots of bugs, and
Yeah,
you have a place in the country where
I
there are a
do.
ton of spiders. So maybe
You
maybe
would
as
not
a
believe you would
yeah.
not believe the spiders that are out in Pennsylvania. Like they're no joke. Like their bodies are the size of like a large grape. The body alone, and then like the legs are like thick. They're not like
Yeah.
spindly little spider legs, and I find them pretty regularly. So I face this on a fairly regular basis, and I'm
Oof.
really trying not to like completely lose it. And I've gotten better. I used to get like lightheaded, like I was going to pass out.
Oh man.
Yeah. So if anyone has any advice for how to overcome spider or any real kind of bug, it's really all bugs, but it's worse with spiders. So
Yeah.
it's pretty severe.
And it's so funny too because that's something that you're scared of, but you're also a complete outdoors person,
Yeah. I love
and
the
they're
outdoors. That's
everywhere.
the craziest thing.
Yeah.
And if I see them, like if I'm hiking and I see them, like there's something on a tree, or if I see a huge spider web and I'm hiking, I'm like, look how cool that is. But when there's one like near me, like in a house or something, I lose it. We were driving home from Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago. We got in the car and I looked in the back seat between like the headrests and the back window, and it was covered with spider webs. Like a spider was in there creating webs like all night long. And I almost couldn't get in the car and drive home. I had to sit in the car for 2 hours after that. And I kept jumping and spazzing, and it's it's pretty bad. I would really like to be able to get this fear under control.
Yeah. I'm wondering if maybe Joe put it in there on purpose to troll you.
Little exposure therapy.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
he's doing what's best for you.
It's funny. I actually thought about getting a spider tattoo, like something really realistic so I could look at it
Hmm.
on myself every day and like get accustomed to it.
Well, this reminds me. Have you ever seen the movie Batman Begins
Uh the
with
first
Christian Bale? With Christian Bale.
Oh, I don't think I have. I'm not a
So
big
the
movie goer,
reason,
unfortunately.
yeah. So we'll move on here, but I just want to. The reason, and according to that movie, the
Yeah.
reason he's Batman is because his biggest fear was being in the dark with bats.
Oh,
So he became the thing that he was most afraid of.
so I'm gonna become Spider-Man?
You're going to become Spider Woman. It should be amazing.
Cool. I could
Yeah.
get
Well,
on board.
I can't guarantee anything, but it's possible.
Okay.
So next thing I want to ask you about is giving speeches. So I know you stand and deliver all the time, and the kind of training you being a trainer and being somebody who stands up and speaks. So if I was to give you 5 minutes on a national or international venue, and you have 5 minutes to speak on whatever you want, knowing that millions of people are going to hear your message, what would you give your speech on and why?
I would say probably something around the life cycle of employee development. I love everything from the beginning process, which is hiring, and I really do geek out around interviewing. If anyone's ever had the misfortune of being interviewed by me, it's kind of intense. I like to really plan everything out and be very very thorough and thoughtful in my process. And I love working with managers to help them figure out how to do that and really get information that they can pull from pull from applicants to truly compare them and make a really informed decision in a short amount of time.
Hmm.
So that is definitely something I love to talk about. I also really like to talk about just any kind of training, the whole life cycle of career pathing. Um, and like I said, I definitely get on my high horse about this philosophy of the teaching hospital, meaning that managers truly need to be coaches in order to have that ongoing learning environment.
Hmm.
And that training, they can't just see training as something that training does and I'm not responsible for that. I think this mindset is probably incredibly overlooked from leadership. They don't really think about it because they're so focused on the business, which is
Hmm.
understandable. That's what they're in charge of. But all the other stuff like learning and culture, all of that other stuff happens accidentally, and that can make or break a company just as much as the business strategy can.
Yeah. Well, I'd be remiss to not now ask you
Mhm.
what your favorite interview question is that you like to ask people
Hmm.
to elicit that information that you can then share.
Well, I get into behavioral interviewing. So
Mhm.
I start off with a series of, I read the resume very carefully. I go through and ask questions around why did you make these different decisions to go from here to there. I'm less interested. I mean, I have to pick a little bit about just to confirm that they're doing the right kind of work.
Mhm.
Um, but uh, but once we've established that, then I like to get into why they made the decisions to study what they studied in college and work at these companies and leave at these times. So, especially if you see a change in their career trajectory over time, like why did you do that and how did that happen? Because I think the decision making in major life decisions is probably more interesting than what you actually did. So I
Mm.
like to dig into that. And then I ask behavioral questions. So those are very specific to the role. So for the digital media sales trainer roles that I've been hiring for mostly the last few years, I will ask very specific questions around their digital media knowledge. So I ask them to, like, I'll say, tell me what the difference between a DSP and an SSP is, for example. This is something
Hmm.
specific to digital media. And if they have any kind of baseline knowledge, it should be an easy thing to answer. But if they don't, if they stumble, then I kind of know their knowledge isn't as deep. I will also ask questions around like their needs assessment process, but specifically, I'll ask them to describe a recent time that a manager came to them and with a training request, like what did you do, how did you unpack it, and how did you make your solution or your what you recommended. And then I also love to ask. So those questions get tailored depending on the role that
Yeah.
I'm hiring for. And
Yeah.
it's always tell me about a time or describe to me what this means. Or what makes a good learning objective. That's another one I ask trainers a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but you can tailor that for the role as well. And then the last question I love to ask people is, how would your manager describe you? And they always go,
Hmm.
oh, wow, that's a great question. Like, cause like, anyone can describe themselves, but like you get a little bit more of an unfiltered, like honest answer, I think, when you,
Yeah.
because I think in the back of their mind, they're like, well, what if she talks to my manager? So I think you get a little bit more of an honest answer. So that's one of my favorite go-tos for pretty much any role.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to our how we started this out, where, hey, I'm not too serious and I'm fun loving and come off as intense and intense and serious.
I
So
guess you're right. Yeah, I guess
that's
I
so
can be
funny.
intense.
So funny. I was just thinking when you're describing that, I've never had an interviewer spend much any time of how what my decision making process was
Mm,
for moving jobs. It was always about, oh, we moved this job, like, and it's like a quick why, and you're like, oh, because I wanted more, I wanted a different thing, and then they move on to the next, and it's
mhm.
always focused on what I did.
Yeah,
It's so I think that's such an interesting paradigm to think about. Like, how does your decision making process work? Like, when do you decide to leave a company? When do you decide to join a new company? And
hmm,
what versus just the standard answer of, well, it just wasn't working out, or I wanted to go to a smaller company, wanted to go to a bigger company. I'm fascinated. I think there's a lesson to be learned for
yeah,
any of us out there who are interviewing people, is like that can be a window into what people's thought process is and how they're
totally.
performing a job, not just around the numbers they hit or the number of trainings they delivered. That's fascinating. And
Totally. Yeah.
I know we're gonna get more into this as well as we go through this today. So
Yeah. I
um,
think that's the biggest thing is like when you're interviewing someone, yes, you need to confirm some things, but what you want to do is get a view into their thought process because that gives you a taste of what it's like to work with them.
mhm. Yeah, that's really it's thought provoking. I'm
Mhm.
thinking about all the interviews I've been on or that I've given. I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever addressed it that way. So
It's
new
interesting
perspective.
for me, in various interviews throughout my career, being interviewed, going for a job, being interviewed,
Mhm.
the companies that don't interview well or don't really put, I want to feel like I've been grilled a little bit because like
Mhm.
this is a huge decision. You're making a huge decision hiring me, and it's a huge decision for me to make the change. Like, let's be thorough about it. And when they're really cavalier about it, it always gives me pause. I've actually had an opportunity that I turned down, and one of the primary reasons was because it was so much more of them selling me on the job than them actually
Mhm.
trying to get to know me.
Yeah. I have a client who was deciding his about his next career move, and he did not take a job for the same reason. He said they were so gung ho for him that he felt it was too easy, which gave him an immediate red flag that like there's something that's either not going well with this role or with
Hmm.
this company. Turns out he was right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want my new hires to feel like they get a sense of what it's like to work with me. Like I'm a thorough person. I want to know what's
Hmm.
going on. Like I make thoughtful decisions. I don't just kind of, it's not like fly by night here, and when things are serious, like we got to get down to work but I also make sure to have fun and laugh and get to know them on a personal level as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah.
That's really, yeah, like you've got me thinking about interviewing and how this also relates to the kind of work I do now.
Yeah.
But enough about me.
Okay.
So you've alluded to this a little bit, and we've been talking a little bit about what you've done. What I'd like to do next is just have you, give us a view of your journey. So we're sitting here today, you're on the podcast. What brought you here? Like, you want to talk about your career, your life, where you're from. Really, it's an open-ended question. Just tell us about your journey to where we are today.
hmm I'll give you a little bit of a background because my background is not my journey to this role that I'm in today is not any path that anyone else would ever follow. You know what I mean? It was just sort of unique how everything kind of fell into place, I guess. And I started off my career. I actually had studied English. I loved reading. I loved writing, and I guess frankly, honestly, at the time, as high school, college age, I had no clue what I wanted to do out of life in life. And I really just kind of went in that direction because it was probably, frankly, the easy direction for me. It was something I was good at. Getting through books and writing papers and things like that came fairly easy to me. And so I was an English major, and I thought I had these big ideas that I was going to be a writer. I was going to move to New York City and I was going to write for magazines. This is in the 90s. And I'm going to move to the city. I'm going to write for magazines. And I did. I started off in like entry level, editorial support roles. And over time, I moved into magazine production. And after a few years of that, I was kind of, still like in my, I'd say mid to late 20s. And really just kind of looked around me and said, I don't see the next job that I want to do. There's nothing here. Like, this has been fun. It's been it's been busy, but, I've been living in New York City, but like, where am I going with this?
Hmm.
And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And at the time, I was also, and this was before, kale and quinoa were like, common like they are today.
Yeah.
I really was getting into reading about the environment, and I was getting into reading about health and how how everything's connected. And I started really getting into wellness. And I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and got my health coach certification, and just took a chance. So now this is probably early 2000s. I took a chance, quit my job, did some freelancing, and then also got my coaching business off the ground. I was doing health coaching. Now at this point, I was like my late 20s,
Hmm.
and I don't think I would think I was a little ahead of my time, right? I wasn't quite ready for it. I don't think the world was, hadn't really taken on as this huge trend yet. It was still pretty early days of this trend.
Hey,
And
Meredith.
yeah.
Just want to interrupt.
Mhm.
Could you describe what health coaching is?
Oh, sure. Health coaching, the type of health coaching that I was doing was working with people who were trying to make improvements in their overall health, whatever that may be. So think holistic wellness. So this is anything, the assumption is that everything in your life contributes to your health. And if you feel unhealthy, then let's sit down and have a talk about all the things in your life. So how you eat, how you exercise, what your relationships are like, what your career is like, what kind of, what's on your mind, what stresses do you have. And I certainly did not position myself as a therapist for sure.
Hmm.
And I didn't really work with people who had extreme issues that needed therapy, or sometimes I worked in tandem, like they had a therapist and I was also there for them.
Hmm.
But it was about like getting people to just recognize where they could make small changes. So my coaching style was around let's just figure out the smallest thing that you can change and just focus on that. So I use this philosophy of one small step. So take
Hmm.
one small step. So like it could just be a focus on drinking a glass of water every morning, the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning. Like let's just focus on that, or walk for 5 minutes every day. Like the smallest thing that we can do to start to integrate good habits And the belief then was that those good habits will eventually push the bad habits out versus trying to solely focus on not doing the bad habit.
Yeah.
Does that help? So a lot of
No,
advice
that's
on
helpful. Yeah.
cooking and exercise were like the primary focus. But with some of my clients, we got into relationships, we got into career, and it really was just me to say, look, well, what do you want to change? And they would give themselves their goal, and they would work at it. And I was just there to say, so how's it going? And
Yeah.
have that person who keeps them accountable for it. Sometimes just
Yeah.
having that accountability partner is all you need.
No, absolutely. So please continue.
Okay, so where was I? So I was doing the health coaching and freelancing, and I think I just wasn't ready. I didn't know how to run a business for myself. I actually had a handful of clients. I was doing pretty well at one point, but it was a little bit feast or famine. I didn't really know how to kind of have this ongoing business, and I also didn't have health insurance, which in hindsight was really stupid. And so I could have, through my past employment, I could have kept it going on my own, and I never signed up for it. Which, in hindsight, I can't believe I did that. So anyway, so I realized I was turning 30, and I realized, I need something more steady. And so I think maybe that life change, that life event of turning 30, kind of gave me a kick in the pants.
Hmm.
And so I got a job at a small digital advertising network, which is essentially like an aggregator of digital advertising space. So brands could go to them and just place one buy, but run across hundreds or thousands of sites.
Hmm.
And so I got a job there actually as an office manager. And I was like, these people seem really interesting and nice. The CEO and the SVP of sales were the same age as me, and they seemed really cool. And I was like, if I'm an office manager and I'm working with nice people, it'll be interesting work. And I really, my family and I like to joke that I was the spaghetti that fell into the sauce. That's how we always
I love that.
I was just in the right place at the right time. But I also, was enthusiastic and raised my hand and offered to help. And after just a couple of months, I started, I was no longer in the office manager job. I was now running their recruiting team, just because I was, offering to help out with, small jobs here and there, whatever you need me to do. And they started to see that I could, take on other things. And interviewing was the first thing that really became my entry into what is my career today. And I think I was so ready for that because I had the coaching background. It was just having
Hmm.
a conversation with someone and figuring out what makes them tick. But at the same time, I had to learn the digital advertising industry because I'd moved from print into digital then. And honestly, I think they only hired me because I had Condé Nast on my resume.
Hmm.
And even though I was in production, they were like, "Ooh, Condé Nast," and we're this tiny little company. It was like 30 people at the time.
Yeah. They're hoping you knew somebody they could sell
Yeah,
to.
yeah. I
Yeah,
think,
that makes
yeah, just
sense.
we were excited to have like a name like that, on a resume for this small startup. And I just got so lucky and got to learn so much. And we doubled in size every year for like the next 4 or 5 years. And my primary responsibilities at first was recruiting, and then I built out a team, and we had that was my first time as a manager. And then I moved into an HR business partner role. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with that and what that type of role is?
Yeah, I am, but you might, if you want to just give us 30 seconds on what that means for people who might not be.
Yeah, it's essentially most companies. It's like an employee relations role. So it's employee relations and talent planning. So like, how are we, planning out our hiring plans for the future? How are we going to structure the teams? Helping managers make major organizational decisions, and then also getting involved whenever there's some sort of employee relation issue. So maybe an employee is underperforming, or there's been a complaint, and that sort of thing. And so, I did that job for 2 years, and this is the same company where I was hired, the startup where I was hired, but we were much bigger at that point. And we were about 350 people when I left. So I was there 8 years. And so at this time, as the HRBP, we went through a lot of change. I had a lot of turnover over those couple of years, and it was incredibly stressful. And I don't think I realized just how much of a toll it was taking on me. So if you ever are working with an HR business partner, just be nice to them because they have a very stressful job. I'm so glad I did it, and I learned so much from it, but I would never ever do it again. I used to joke that people, like, if you were sitting down to have a conversation with me, it was probably your worst day at work.
Oh
It was
man,
like
yeah.
over and over and over again. And
Oof.
but the silver lining to it was my partner group was sales. And so I'd already hired, like, I don't even know, hundreds of salespeople at this point. And so I was very much embedded with the sales team. I knew everybody, had hired most of them. And for the first time ever, we had a new CRO, and he hired our first sales trainer. And this woman, Kara is her name, is became soon became my mentor. I realized that, anytime we had a problem employee that was going on a development plan, I needed to be aligned with her so that we could get this person over the hump. And I truly believe that I can't even tell you how many times I've had managers come to me and say, this person isn't going to make it. We need to exit them. We need to, manage them out. And they've given up. And I would say the majority of times we're able to turn it around, and not just
Hmm.
60, 51%. I'm talking like 85, 90% of the time.
Wow.
If you really can change, the manager needs to change their mindset. Oftentimes the team surrounding the person needs a change in mindset. And everybody just needs to believe that this is possible. As long as the employee has the will and has the spirit to turn things around, I really believe that you can. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again. Um, so so I aligned with the head of training on that, and then she started giving me onboarding responsibilities. So I started helping out with new sales hires and getting them through the onboarding process. And that was, I'd already done some training, like recruiting, interview skills training, some management training, manager skills training, and things like that. But this
Hmm.
was the first time that I was truly aligned with sales and sales training. And so I learned so much from her, and she just took me under her wing. And to this day is one of my best friends. Like, I absolutely adore her. She's amazing. So she moved into a sales management role, and her head of sales training role opened up. And that was the push I was talking about earlier. She gave me
Yeah.
a nudge that I needed, and she and the
Wow.
CRO believed in me and gave me that opportunity. And that got me to where I am today. So I'm not
It's
a
amazing.
salesperson, have never have been, but I love working with them. And I do feel like the recruiting skills, sort of gets pretty close because you really have to sell, especially when you work at a
Yeah.
store that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
That's,
really cool.
yeah.
That I'm just
But
thinking. So So you said something earlier about like the spaghetti and the sauce being at the right place at the right time. I'm going to challenge you a little bit and say that it to me, what strikes me here is listening to you describe that is you made some strategic decisions and some strategic bets. And as
Mhm.
we talked about earlier, learn to take some risks
Mhm.
in the hopes that they pay off. Yeah, of course, like being in the right place at the right time is always a part of it.
Yeah.
But there doesn't sound like a ton of luck here. It sounds like hard work, being smart, being resourceful, getting in with the right types of companies, and surrounding yourself with the right types of people, like Kara,
Yeah.
your mentor, and the CRO and the CEO that want to invest in you because one, they like you, and two, they know that you can deliver for the company.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
definitely
I mean, I
something that.
think, yeah, I feel incredibly lucky that I had 8 great years at this company. The company is called Undertone. And had 8 great years there. I worked with some amazing people, but definitely was a deliberate decision to align myself with smart, interesting people. And the persona that I adopted in this environment was a humbleness and a willingness to learn, and an eagerness, willingness to raise my hand and help. and like say, I don't know how to do this thing, but if you give me some guidance, I'm willing to give it a try. And most people, are happy to do that. And look for those people in your career who are happy to do that, and they're going to help you get far.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next question, I want to ask you
Mhm.
something. So, as a former salesperson, been through a lot of trainings. What's your favorite training to deliver where you're at today? Like, what's the training that you or your trainers get the highest ratings on? Like, what's like if you could deliver any training at your company today, what would that specific training be?
Hmm. Gosh, there's so many. I
Well,
love.
let me ask you actually,
Yeah.
how many different sales training, I guess that would be classes or workshops, do you actually offer within the company you're at today?
Oh boy. I don't have a number off the top of my head. I mean, so there's components to training. Okay. So
Yeah.
there's onboarding, which is one piece of it. At some companies, you go to large companies where with these massive training teams and they've got disciplines, but we're a small, scrappy, small team of 4 people.
Hmm.
So we all do a little bit of everything. So you've got onboarding, which is one piece of it. And I love onboarding. I've done a lot of onboarding in my career. So
Hmm.
probably not my number one thing to do anymore, but it was for a really long time because in onboarding, specifically with salespeople, is you get to sit with each individual as they're learning the pitch and they're learning the products, and you get to role play with them and you really get to know them. And it's very rewarding
Yeah.
year in and year out for a long time. It becomes, can get monotonous, but
Hmm.
I
Well,
think.
I was just gonna say, you're also, thinking back to my career, when you're onboarded, you're also, it's like a new relationship. You're like,
Mhm.
oh my God, I see the possibility. I can,
Yeah,
love the product. I got through the interviewing process with
yeah,
Meredith, as you said, which is challenging. I got through the interview process. I'm here. They believe in me. And you haven't yet missed your quarterly number. You
yeah,
haven't yet had a customer say no to you. It's like, yeah, like it's just so fun to
yeah.
start a new company
Blue
and go
sky.
through a fun inbound process. Yeah, sky's the limit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for the trainer, like they've been there, done that 100 times. They've onboarded so many people, but we always had to remember that it's that person's brand new experience. Like when they walk through the
Hmm.
front door, like this is their first time walking into that company, and like it's so overwhelming and you don't know anybody, and like I just always tell my team, like we always have to remember that it's brand new for them when they walk through that door and when they sit
Hmm.
down with us to practice the first time. And so our job is to like get back into that beginner's mind with them and like help them through it. And they're so incredibly grateful for it because they're the new hire where they're kind of their first friend, and so it's incredibly rewarding. I love onboarding. But again,
That's
like I said, I've been doing it for many, many years. So it's less novel to me these days. But I would
yeah.
say then there's product training, which has to get done. Not the sexiest
Yes.
thing in the world.
Not the sexiest. Yeah.
Has to get done. And then, but what is interesting I love hearing the seller's questions when we roll the thing out, and getting to hear everybody pick it apart and like work through all their insecurities and concerns around it, and
Hmm.
then rally behind it and get excited about it, and they've got that new thing to talk about. So it's exciting when it actually lands. And then
Yeah.
the third component is skills development, which is aligned with career pathing. And so I love the basics. I love working with people who've been here a while but have been promoted into a sales role, and
Hmm.
watching them move from a sales support to a sales leadership or sales individual contributor role,
Hmm.
because they know everything already. You don't have to teach them all the basics, but they have to shift their lens on it. They're no longer the person who knows the details and what it is and how it works. Now they have to be the person who says, this is why it's good for you and this is the benefit for you. So getting them
Yeah.
to shift that mindset is really fun. So I do love teaching like meeting skills and structure, and how to ask for the asking for the close, and how to judge whether or not how to prepare for a meeting and judge whether or not it was a successful meeting. So I don't think a lot of salespeople think about it. They go in, they talk about their product, and then they leave and they think, oh, I explained it well, so I hit it out of the park. No,
Yeah.
you actually need some sort of an outcome. How are you moving it forward?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I love that, but I love all the skills around it. I love, negotiation is one of my favorites.
Hmm.
Presentation skills, people, especially when people are really nervous and you can help them overcome those fears. That's super
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, all objection handling is another one we do a lot. Oh, and then of course, the flagship, my favorite is working with managers who, trying to teach them how to be better coaches,
Hmm.
or how to be coaches in general. So I think a lot of great salespeople get promoted into management roles because they're such great salespeople.
Hmm.
And then they get into that role and they become the super seller,
Yep.
and they take pride. Their source of pride is being the one that everyone has to go to so that they can save the day. So I swooped in and I closed the deal for my seller because they couldn't do it on my own because I'm the super salesperson. And that is a true source of pride when you hear them talk about what they love about work. And so what I try to do is shift that mindset for them and help them see, actually my source of pride should be helping, teaching someone, coaching someone to the point where they can do it. They have upped their skills and they're now doing things that they didn't think that they could do. And so if I can see that future in them and give them the feedback and get them over the hump, then that should be my source of pride. And once when I have a conversation with a manager about that and you see that like click, that light bulb go off in their eyes, you know that like the future is never going to be the same for them, right? From this
Yeah.
day forward, they're going to think more about development than being the savior.
Yeah. That's cool. Some of the tech companies, I don't know if this is the case where you're at today, when you move into a sales manager role, you don't make any more money. Like you don't get a raise. It's like you have to
Mhm.
actually want to be a manager for
Yeah.
the sake of being a coach and a manager and helping other people grow versus, and I'm just speaking personally for me in my career,
Hmm.
everywhere I've always been, the next step in the career as a salesperson is, if you want it, is to be a manager. And part of the reason you do that is to make more money. Like it's a
Hmm.
promotion, you get more money, you get a higher base. And like I know of a few companies where that is not the case anymore because they really want people like you're describing that are like, I want to be a coach. I want to teach others what I've done well versus being the person who comes in and saves the day.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I've actually heard a philosophy around a sales philosophy around take your absolute best rock star salespeople and make them trainers. Like, and
Mm.
say that to a sales manager and they're like, no, I
Y-
can't do that. But like, if you can duplicate, like, think about it, if you took your, two or three best trainers in each region and had them working with sales training on constantly coaching everybody and doing, sitting down and doing like real time deal coaching with other sellers, like, just think about how much better everyone could be. Training really is, it's a relatively small investment if you think about building out an entire sales team versus hiring a couple of trainers.
mhm.
It really is an investment in a company that amplifies success across the team if it's done correctly.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to the next question, which I think we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes or so.
Hmm.
And I want you to, I'd love for the audience to hear what you're passionate about. And I think it's very obvious one of the things you're passionate about. But sky's the limit on this one as well, Meredith. So, yeah, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, I think what I'm passionate about is probably pretty clear, as you said, is manager coaching for sure. That is the thing that I truly believe training lives or dies in the field when managers do or do not reinforce what is taught. I'll give you an example. I was actually
Yeah.
chatting a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine who is a therapist, and I was, asking, oh, tell me more about, the kind of therapy that you do. Who do you work with? What kinds of people do you work with? And she was saying that she actually used to work with children, but doesn't anymore. And I thought, oh, that must be, really heartbreaking to see children struggling. And she said, no, it was actually because she stopped doing it because she found that so often the parents undermined what progress she made with them. And I
Mm,
was like, oh my God, yes, that is at the core of everything I believe in terms of training, right? you put them in a classroom, you train them these great habits. They like rah rah, high five. They're super excited to go do their new skills, and then their managers immediately undermine everything that was taught to them. So like
Mhm.
sometimes the managers are either oblivious to the training or they actually will be counterproductive to the training. So I'm like, it's pointless, right? It's just I'm running and I'm like a hamster on a wheel over here trying to do training. So instead, my approach is really getting managers involved and as much as possible enabling them to be the trainers. So like keep our team small and be the resource that enables managers to do, you know, coaching in their one-on-ones, coaching after a meeting, team coaching once a month with their direct reports all together in a room. I give them ideas for that, you know, and get them sharing ideas with each other, and you know everybody's learning, and the employees, everybody benefits. You know, everybody feels like, you know, holy cow, I'm learning so much more than I was before.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one thing I'm very passionate about, and I would also say I'm also very passionate about just in general, like the evolution of self. So, and I think all these things are intertwined, but our relationships with our friends and our family and the world and ourselves and our colleagues and nature, and it's this intersection of career growth and a healthy life balance that I find endlessly fascinating.
Mhm. So we'll likely have salespeople and sales management
Hmm.
who will listen to this episode.
Hmm.
If you could give to them both the salespeople and sales management, what would you like to share with them? And let's say that you could shake them if you needed to. What's the like one or two sentences? What do you want to get across to them around everything you just said?
Okay, so salespeople, I would say, and we say this all the time. Everybody throws this phrase around. It's being consultative, right? Be a consultative seller, but really
Mhm.
ask yourself, what does a consultant do? Right? If I was running a business and I went to one of the big consulting firms, and I hired them, what would they do? Well, they would come, they would get to know my business, they would understand the intricacies of my business, my what I'm trying to achieve, what my pain points are, and then they would make recommendations that are going to help me solve those problems.
Correct. Yep.
So that's it. Right. So it's not about going in there and trying to just give creative solutions or describe your, you know, your product. It's really truly understanding them. And that takes time. And so to do that, you need to learn to be disciplined with your schedule, because it's really easy to be a very busy salesperson, but not actually productive.
Yeah.
So this balance of this mastery of time management, or at least knowing what you need to outsource. Like, how can I get help from other people? Who can I reach out to? The best salespeople I know are those who know how to use their resources to get things done.
Yeah.
So that's the advice I'd have for sellers. And then for
Hmm.
managers, it just goes back to this coaching is you need to be deliberate about what kind of a culture you want to build. And if you want training to truly happen and truly stick and people to feel invested in, then your managers need to be fully bought in and truly running the training program. So I think of the sales training team as a resource, but the managers own it.
Yeah. It's something you were saying around consulting and consultant. I
Hmm.
used to have a pet peeve. What it's still a pet peeve when you meet a salesperson who works for a very specific company and they call themselves a consultant,
Hmm.
because by definition, and they're, I'm a big fan of the consultative approach. But let's not. And one of the things I also do is I also do sales advising for startups, and I hear this when I was like, "Oh, we want to be consultative." Yes, you need to be consultative, but at the end of the day, if you're selling one specific product and the only outcome you're ever going to suggest is the same thing every time, then you're not really
Yeah.
truly a consultant. Where, and I'm thinking, I was at a conference where somebody's like, "Oh, I'm a consultant," and I'm like, "Oh, like who do you consult for?" And they're like, "Well, I work for this. It's a small small SaaS platform." And I said, "So you're a salesperson?" "No, I'm a consultant." I said, "Well, no matter what's going on in my world, the only thing you're going to recommend to me is that
Yeah.
I pay you a monthly subscription fee to use this platform." He was like, "Well, yes." I'm like, "Well, okay, I guess you can call yourself a consultant." And you know, I think when you get to bigger companies where you've got lots of different types of solutions,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But just an aside, that's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening,
I'm
who call
sure.
you consultants that are really just salespeople, it's okay. Like buyers on the other side of the table know that you're a salesperson. Like
Yeah.
it's you're not hiding that by saying you're a consultant.
Yeah. Exactly. I totally agree. I think if to truly be a consultant, you have to have an array of solutions, right?
Yeah,
And it
exactly,
shouldn't be
exactly.
obvious, black and white. I've got one thing to sell you. Yeah, I would totally agree with
Yeah,
you there. And totally
exactly.
different style, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So next thing I want to hear a little bit about is the thing that you're most proud of.
Sure. Well, professionally, I would say the thing I'm most proud of is the manager coaching program. No surprise there.
Hmm.
I have been preaching this for years here and at previous companies. So throughout my career, but really for the first time ever, for a number of reasons, for the first time ever, I was actually able to launch a coaching program in North America. And I just couldn't be more excited about it. We're only a couple of months into it, and already just seeing how everybody's taking to it is it just fills me with joy to hear everybody getting into it and talking about it and sharing ideas, and it's a total shift in mindset. So that is just so exciting to me.
That's awesome.
And then, and something I'm really proud of in my personal life is just like my physical and mental health. I struggled earlier on in my life with gut health problems and and just mental health. I was talking earlier. I was always concerned and worried and anxious about what people were thinking of me, and
Hmm.
I overcame these things through awareness and through trial and error and a lot of hard work. And people will ask me, like, I say, I'm going to go for a run. What are you doing tonight? I'm going to go for a run. Are you training for something? And my answer is, yes, I'm training to go for a hike on my 90th birthday.
Oh, I love
That is
that.
100% my
I love that.
plan. Not training for a race. I fully 100% plan to go for a hike on my 90th birthday. And I can't
That's
wait to do it.
amazing.
It's going to be awesome. But there's a lot of things I have to do between now and then to be healthy enough to do that.
Yeah. And I think by your 90th birthday, you might not be as scared of the spiders if you see them on the hike as
Yeah.
well. You've got a lot of time to practice that.
Yeah. Maybe I should add to it that I will also not be afraid of spiders when that happens.
You got plenty of time for that. So, love to hear a little bit about just your general philosophy on life. I think you've done a really good job of weaving that in and out of what we talked about.
Mhm.
Just a summary, like, yeah, what's your general philosophy on life overall?
I think it's pretty simple. First is well, it's maybe simple in theory, but harder in actuality. First is that you are what you do, which means how you choose to spend your precious time on Earth is a reflection of what you value. And so I believe that we feel troubled in life when we spend our time doing things that don't correlate with what we think we value. So, for example, if I say, um, you know, health is a value of mine, but I never work out or I eat McDonald's every day, then you know m- it doesn't really align with my what I say I value. So what you do is what you value. How you spend your time is what you value. So you know, sometimes for some of us it can take a little re-examining to say, "Huh, what am I spending my time on?"
Hmm.
And the key to that is really all the little choices that we make every single day. And then my second philosophy is pretty simple. And this took me a while to learn, was I am better than no one and no one is better than me. And I think, you got to, people are at different stages in their life trajectory and their career history, but no one is better than me. I'm not better than anyone. We're all equals.
Yeah, that is it's such a simple concept, but so profound. I was actually talking to a friend about that yesterday, and it
Mhm.
came up around parenting because everybody tells their child that they're special, or most parents will tell their children that they're so special. And I have a 3.5 year old, almost a 4 year old, and what we've decided is that um, she is the most special to us, but she is no more special than anybody else in the world. She just happens to
Aw.
be special to us because she's ours. And I think that's such a cool thing because I think both high achievers, high performers, where your ego gets boosted, you do see that I'm more important than you, you're less important than me, both from like in school
Mhm.
but also in the workplace where you see
Mhm.
that. And then and then when that ends up showing up in the kind of work that I used to do and the kind of place you interact is you end up seeing that show up in favoritism on
Mhm.
teams, like can tear apart cultures, as you know. So, um,
Totally.
yeah, I think,
I
yeah,
love
that
that.
philosophy, yeah, that philosophy is so powerful.
And
Um, yeah.
for some, it's like treat people better. You're not better than them. Like be kind to everyone. And, to your point, but I also think the flip side of that, which was the realization I needed, which was helped me get out of this fear of caring what everyone thought of me. Right. It was like if this person had more experience than me or was more senior than me, I was scared to be around them. But when I
Yeah.
just realized like they're just more experienced than me, but they're not better than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It helped.
And they've likely been in this similar spot
Right.
that you're in at the
Right.
moment,
Hmm.
and everybody's grown. And
Exactly.
then the first thing you mentioned about your philosophy is I forgot how I read where I read this. They said, I don't know if it was a book or somebody told me this. If somebody could follow you around and see how you spent your time, and they could look at your checking account or your credit card statement and see what you spend your
Mm.
money on, they would know almost everything about you, what you care
Oh my
about,
God, yes.
yeah, like what you care about, what's important to you, what you value in the world, what you don't value in the world. So it's just so fascinating to think of like
Mhm,
as time is the really the only resource that is just non-renewable. And like you said,
mhm.
like what do you spend your time on? That tells me almost everything I need to know about you.
Yeah, exactly, and if that person observing you would describe you differently than you would describe yourself, you're
Yeah,
probably a little uneasy. You're probably feeling some unease, and
that's
that
yeah,
that's the time to and then but it's so freeing at the same time because then you're like, well, now I can start saying no to things. And I don't have to feel bad. Like I can go off into the woods for the weekend and don't have to worry about showing up at this party or that party like because these are the things that I value. And
yeah,
that's why.
that's beautiful, Meredith.
Mhm.
So just wrapping up today, and I want to thank you now, and I'll thank you again. But amazing conversation. I know the audience is going to get a lot out of this. I want to ask you if there's anything specifically that you still have top of mind, or that something that's come up for you during the conversation today that you'd like to share with the audience. And I say that because you've already shared a lot of really amazing nuggets of wisdom and things about yourself and things that they can consider. But has anything else come up for you that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to just say that even though I am still working full time in a training role right now, I am starting to work with a small number of clients who are looking for career coaching.
Hmm.
So if there is anybody out there listening who is looking for a career coach, I would be happy to chat with them. Ideally, I'm looking for someone. I'd be looking to work with someone who is really at a tipping point in their career, maybe need some guidance on getting to the next step in their career or getting through some change. Also, if there's any, again, going back to that holistic approach to life, if you also need help with creating a healthier balance in an inside work and outside work, I'm also able to help with that as well.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So, where can the audience find you? How can they get in touch with you?
Sure, LinkedIn, probably the easiest way. I am on
Okay.
LinkedIn. I, post occasionally, so you should be able to find me on there. Meredith Ian, last name IAN, like Ian. And then I also have a blog. It's steadyisfast.blogspot.com.
Cool.
Yep.
So I will just for the audience as well. I will make sure these are in the episode notes as well, so you can reach out and connect with Meredith if you'd like to. And so, last thing we do with all the guests, love if you would leave us with some words of wisdom from the lips of Meredith.
Okay. So I'll give you two. One, wander outside. Go outside. If you live in a city, get out into nature. Just get some time among the trees. It's so good for your soul. And two, don't be afraid to fail. And when you do, be kind to yourself and know that you can always do better tomorrow.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Meredith, for being on today, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with me, Jason Frizzell. Enjoyed today's episode? Please tell your friends, give us a shout out and a follow on Facebook and Instagram, and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. If something from this episode has piqued your interest and you'd like to connect about it, please email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners.